So the topic for today is proposals. One of the comments from the mid-semester feedback was that in addition to changing the format, taking away the sound clips, having one large clip with my voice behind the slide advancement, there was some want for notes at the bottom. So for this one, I've tried to add some notes at the bottom, and I will upload this in its final form on our course web page. But I'll keep this format because um, more people seem to say that they still liked this format, but I definitely want to make sure that all learning styles are being helped and assisted. Okay, so proposals. This is the next major document after you've completed your memo and your career report. I'm asking you to think of a policy that you would like to change, or think of a policy that you would like to create, and come up with a proposal topic for that. I'm going to upload the proposal packet, and in the proposal packet, you'll see that I have created a mock proposal where my proposal that I've created is that all instructors that are hired at the University of Pittsburgh should be given training on CourseWeb or Blackboard. Other institutions typically call it Blackboard. At Pitt, for whatever reason, we call it CourseWeb. Whenever I was hired at the university, I met with my supervisor. I was given a textbook, and that was the extent of the training that I received. So other universities that I've worked on and at before, I've also worked at Miami University. I've worked at the University of Cincinnati. I've worked at Cincinnati State. I currently work at Robert Morris University. I've worked at Warren County Career Center. I've worked at a lot of different places, and they vary in terms of their training. What I have learned as an employee from all of those places is that employees that are well trained typically do better. And I think that if an instructor is forced to receive training on CourseWeb, that the students will receive a better experience. I have a colleague of mine that I work with at RMU that is just beside himself right now because he doesn't know how to use CourseWeb. And he is an Excel, he teaches Excel. And his students are very frustrated because they're used to using CourseWeb. They want him to put their grades online, and he doesn't know how. And so my proposal is all about the fact that all instructors should be able to know how to use CourseWeb and should be able to use online tools to assist student learning. So I encourage you to look at that proposal as an example. Now, it's not a completed example. It's meant to kind of get you started. I'm going to provide you multiple examples of student examples as well. Okay. So, what is a proposal? It's a plan or suggestion, especially a formal or written one, put forward for consideration or discussion by others. I really love talking about proposals because it is one of those documents that, regardless of the field, I feel like you're likely to make one. I can see that whether you're in the health field or engineering or whatever field you're in, this idea of, okay, we need to come up with a good idea, or we need to change something, is kind of universal. So it goes by a lot of different names: a plan, an idea, a project, a manifesto, an action point. But you've probably already written one. You don't even realize it. So it says, if they don't like our proposal, I'll show them the kittens. Everybody likes kittens. So this is what the book talks about. It walks us through how to go about planning and writing a proposal. It talks about the differences between an internal proposal versus an external, meaning, are we writing it for our internal organization or is it going out to a client? The idea of meeting a deadline, because a lot of times the most stressful thing about a proposal is that you are under a very, very tight deadline. And then we'll talk a lot about RFPs, which are that's a word that you hear kicked around a lot in healthcare. RFPs. I know, especially in my house, my husband works for a healthcare company. I don't believe I've ever said which one just to protect his privacy, but I think I hear the word RFPs probably said 30 times in my home. So it is a big thing if you work in the healthcare world. All right. So this is where I would ask you, okay, class, where do you see this being used? Have you ever written one before? Was it accepted? How did you come up with your idea? Where do you come up with your best ideas? I know for me, if I'm being observed, in the classroom, or I have to create a new lecture or a new activity or a new assignment, a lot of times, they always say, oh, come up with an idea in the shower. Well, for me, I take my ideas out on runs, and I take problems out on runs too. So I'm not sure where you come up with your best ideas, but this is the assignment you're going to need to use whatever that tool is. So planning and writing a proposal. Generally, we're trying to get someone to do something, whether that means purchase a product, go with our services, or we're trying to meet a need for a particular audience. And the number one thing we've got to do in this document is we have to convince them that they are going to benefit in some way. That if our document is picked up, that if our plan is followed through, the audience will benefit in some way. Generally, proposals are created by teams. My online class, you guys create your proposals by yourselves. You guys are in silos. You are going to receive feedback from one another, and you are going to comment on each other's proposals and improve each other's documents. But because that we do not have a physical space to meet, you're writing your proposals by yourself. My RMU students write their proposals together, but they also have a small group component involved with that class. The class at Pitt does not have really as large of a focus as we do at RMU. All right, and like I said, it's typically external or internal. Keep in mind, though, that a lot of times proposals are written by teams once you get out in the real world, right? And there are instances where you may be asked by your supervisor to write one by yourself, and sometimes you're a one-woman show, right, or a one-man show. But most of the time, you're working with a team, which has its own sense of stress. And I think this next PowerPoint that we're going to be talking about is collaboration. So we're going to talk about a lot about small group. There's different types. Grants, which that's a whole class. So if you're looking for another W intensive class, I do teach a grant writing class. That one I do not do online. They have not asked me to teach in an online capacity, that class. I don't even know if it's possible to teach that one online. I suppose you can do anything online. And then the other one is an RFP. All right, so here's the typical content. I'm not going to read this to you. You're certainly able to read it. What I want you to get from this slide is just knowing that this is very much a list, in that you could have it. That doesn't mean you have to have it. So say that your supervisor asks you to write a proposal. It is possible that you will have a problem statement, but you may not have a budget, because maybe there isn't a budget for the plan. Maybe it's not going to cost anything. Maybe everything's already paid for. So I would say in most situations there is some kind of budget. So let's keep looking. So we've got materials needed, advantages. It gets really detailed all the way up till attachments and supplemental materials. So it's a pretty detailed list of possibilities. Ours does not have this many parts. All right, so for the internal proposal, and actually let's go back for just a second. I want to highlight just a few things. The problem solution, this is where you'll talk about. We'll talk about the ones that you actually do have to talk about. So for the problem solution, this is where you talk about the need. What is it about the status quo that is no longer acceptable? So one of my past students had the idea that she thought that Pitt's campus does not have a 24-hour crisis line that you can call if you have been sexually assaulted. Yes, you can call the campus police, but we do not have a 24-hour crisis line. And so she was like, okay, that's problematic because of the nature of sexual assault. It's very different. It's a specific team, and it's a very different type of problem, and it calls for a different type of response. And so her idea was like, this is an issue, and it needs changed. And so she talked about, okay, this is how many instances, this is how many times this has happened on our campus. This is the other campuses that have something like this. These are the resources that we currently have. And she kind of like identified why this is problematic. And then the next step was, here's why we need it. Here's all the reasons why a crisis line is beneficial. And so she talked about the benefits of having a line, and how it helps survivors of rape and sexual assault, and what it does in terms of keeping people on campus safe. Sometimes you'll have, in the third section, you'll have an assignment for the reader, what you want them to do, be it accepting your proposal. It could be contacting somebody like a congressperson. Usually there is a timeline or dates of work or completion. You almost always are making a promise of when things are going to be done. Generally, you do have a budget. A lot of times this is one you may not see, especially if this is a new proposal, previous positive association. If you've had projects that you've worked on before, this is kind of like name dropping. This is not always allowed, especially if you're not allowed to talk about work that you've done with a client. Like I know my husband has worked with multiple, he's worked with the NBA, he's worked with Coca-Cola, and he has permission from all of these people to kind of say, yes, these people are our clients. And what that does is it gives you kind of street cred, that we have all these prestigious clients. And so that's very common to talk about who you've worked with. How you're going to do the job. People want to know how this is going to be done. Like, they're not going to sign up for your plan if they don't know the steps to get there. If you signed up with me and I'm going to be your nutritionist, and I said, yes, I'm going to help you lose 25 pounds, but then I didn't tell you how, and then you later learned out, guess what, all you get to do is eat cabbage, I don't think you'd be very happy about that. So I think walking someone through the steps of how it's going to get done is pretty important. And then the procedures proposed to complete. What materials are we going to need? What ones do we have? Which ones are we going to have to ask for? The schedule. Sometimes have different project stages. Some kind of confidence statement that, yes, this is something we can do. Willing to provide further information. This one is obviously not applicable to us, but other projects, they may say, or you may want to say, I'm willing to provide other information if you need more detailed information about X, Y, and Z. We also do not have 13 in ours, but it is common in some business proposals to talk about, while company A has this, we offer that. Appreciation for our opportunity to submit is, again, one of those just common courtesy, use your manners, always say please and thank you, and if you forget, it's a bad thing. 15, again, not appropriate or applicable to us, but often applicable in the business world. There are certain times when this proposal is valid, and this is definitely applicable for RFPs, where you have a business reach out and say, look, we're interested in hearing about, your product, tell us about it. And when that company comes back, that's the offer for that time period. So if they say it's going to be $1,000, it's $1,000 for that time period. Now, if you reach out to them 5 years later, it's not going to be $1,000 again. It's probably going to be like $3,000 or $5,000. So you have to keep that in mind, that cost is going to go up. And then almost all proposals have some kind of attachments or supplemental material. A proposal is meant to be a short, concise document that outlines your plan in a persuasive way. It is not meant to be every little detail of the plan. That's why there are attachments. That's why you say, please see attachment A, please see attachment B, because it keeps your document concise. All right, if it's an internal one, it's sometimes written to your manager or supervisor. I can see this where you're trying to get someone in management to make a change. It could be as simple as like casual Fridays, maybe improve something, or to fund a project. Maybe you want to start up a new division, or you have an idea for a new project or a new team. If it's external, now we're thinking outside of our group. So we're talking to a client. Sometimes it's solicited, right? Sometimes it's an RFP, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's about a product, sometimes it's about a service, sometimes it's long, sometimes it's short. And so that's why I think it's teaching this class is difficult, because a lot of times students are like, well, how many pages is it? And I'm like, it depends. And they're like, well, how do you write the executive summary? It depends. And a lot of it does depend. It depends on your audience. Everything goes back to that. What's your purpose? What's your audience? What are you trying to accomplish? I know that's so frustrating, and I know that it's so subjective, but that's kind of the nature of the beast. It is not math, right? It's writing. Generally, it's time sensitive, and if it is a tight deadline or a stressful situation or a big deal, it's produced by a team. All right, grant proposals, my favorite thing to talk about. This is generally written to a nonprofit, although there are sometimes research proposals that are written as well that would fall under this. There's a whole class on this. It's impossible to talk about this in one slide. But if you want to learn more about it, I'm in Kathy, room 2311 from Tuesdays from 6 to 8:30. You can learn all about grants. Solicited with guidelines regarding format and information that must be contained. And that's all what the grant maker tells you. So whatever the person that's giving you the money, whatever they ask for, you have to give them. And they are real specific, down to the staple, right? If you put a staple on there, a lot of times you won't get the grant. If you don't include Form 990, you don't get the grant. And this is all grant speak. So if you took a class, you know more about it. What you need to know is that a grant is a type of proposal, and a grant is a way that people seek to get money for nonprofits. That's really all you need to know about it. It has a due date. It's generally in order to get money for research or assistance, and you generally have to talk about what you're going to do with the money. Unfortunately, this is not a way to get a paid trip to Hawaii. I did look into it, not a possibility. So grants are a great way for nonprofits to be successful, to start up, to accomplish really amazing things for our community. But they are not a great way for any of us to have college paid for indefinitely in Hawaii. I attempted to find this out. It can't happen. Okay, requests for proposals, or RFPs. They're written by an organization to solicit proposals from outside vendors for services or products, as I had previously indicated. Generally, they tell you what they want to know, and they generally don't want to know too much other than that. They describe the requirements and deliverables in detail, and they want you to give them the solutions. If you leave out, which this often happens, if you leave out what they are specifically asking for, it often will be rejected. So if they're asking you for 500 words of an executive summary, you need to have 500 words of an executive summary. If they ask for the budget and the executive summary to be page 1 and 2, make sure it is page 1 and 2. This is not the time for creative writing. If you want to write a poem, feel free to buy yourself a journal and write all the poems you want. RFPs, not the time for creative writing. You've got to follow guidelines. Same way with grant writing. Grant writing is very much you do exactly what the funder wants you to do, and you tell them everything they want to know. Indicate the evaluation criteria to inform vendors of organization selection criteria for proposals. So they'll generally tell you what information they need to know from you, and you need to make sure that you're providing that. All right, so here's the tips. This is the good stuff. This is the meat. This is based off kind of research that I've done. Most of it is more up to date. You got to make it as simple as possible, right? It's still that KISS acronym. Keep it simple, stupid, right? Make sure it's a good idea. That is number one. And that's the number one thing you want from your project. Your proposal is not going to be successful if it's not a good idea. So that's number one. So actually it should be number one, not number two. Write an amazing executive summary. A lot of times, especially for grant writers, they will only read the executive summary and the budget. Make it clear why it's needed or why it meets a need. Be succinct. So again, that tight copy. Answer the client's questions. You'd be surprised how many RFPs will go round and round and round and talk about this, that, and the other and will not answer any of their questions, or will answer them in a very minor way. Provide relevant examples of similar work. So say, like, we've done this before. There's a time when we did this for Coke, or there was a time when we did this for Pepsi, or show that this is not your first rodeo. Articulate what makes you the best choice. So here's some tips. These are things that over the years when students have done this assignment, what has made them more successful. Pick a topic you're passionate about. You're going to have to write about it. You might as well enjoy yourself. If you pick something that you are like, is not going to produce anything good, make sure it's something that you care about, something that you have a heart for. If I was writing this assignment, I would definitely I would talk about something with like maybe addiction, or something with running, or something to improve Pitt's campus, something that's close to my heart, something that I care about, maybe something with teaching. Make sure the problem statement is persuasive and backed up with research. So all the while you're being persuasive, it can't just be because you're a really good salesperson. It's got to be because other people are saying it's problematic as well, or that the policy needs altered. Make a clear connection between the problem and the proposed solution. You can't assert that there's a problem and then the solution have nothing to do with the problem. So make sure that there's a connection there. Objectives should be, and for some reason people really, really tend to struggle with this, clear, realistic and attainable, measurable, have a time frame for completion, focus directly on the problem and challenge, and sufficient to deal with the problem and the challenge. And I have a lot of examples from students that have done this proposal in the past. One of my favorite ones was from a student who she wanted to get rid of the tampon tax. For some reason, women are taxed for using menstrual products, even though it's not a luxury to have a period. They are still taxed as if it is. It's taxed the same way that you are taxed by buying a really expensive car. And so California got rid of it. Her idea was PA should get rid of it. And she gave all the reasons why. And I'll post it online so you can see. It's a very strong proposal. It received an A. Between her and the sexual assault hotline, they're two really strong examples of good ideas, good proposals. And I've seen some other proposals too that are a little bit more creative. I had one student say that we should get rid of the automatic flushers, right? He said they scare children and they're wasteful for water. Just all kinds of ideas. I have students right now at RMU that want to propose to change the intersection. And recently there was just a huge accident in front of it. So clearly they're onto something. So there's really, the sky's the limit. Whatever you want to talk about, whatever you want to change. All right, so here was my example. This is what I was talking about at the beginning of the lecture. My idea was all new faculty should be required, because that's the thing. If you don't require it, people aren't going to do it. To attend a workshop on PeopleSoft and CourseWeb. Because I had no idea what PeopleSoft was. I was like, what is PeopleSoft? I had to learn the hard way. New faculty workshop creates classroom success. So that's my title. It's short, but it tells you what's going on. Here I've got my executive summary, my problem summary. I've got some research there. And this is not all of it. This is just to give you kind of like a piece of what you'll have. So this is the parts that you'll have. You'll have a topic, a title, an executive summary, a problem statement, and then you'll have the objectives. This is where people trip up. PeopleSoft workshop on September 1st, 2017. Get those dates in there. Will increase retention and understanding of the program by 50%. That gets to those measurable outcomes. So like I could take a group of teachers and ask them, what's your knowledge of PeopleSoft? Like, what do you know about PeopleSoft? And then I could give my workshop and then I could measure it after. And then of course, the control, right? It's a pre and a post test. The only thing that changed was my workshop. So CourseWeb workshop will guarantee new faculty leave the meeting with one completed online course by September 1st, 2017. So that's kind of what I'm promising, that by that date, I will have promise they're at least going to have one online course. And then I'm providing a timeline. Sometimes this is provided in a Gantt chart, which there's an example in your book. These are all the things that I'm promising to do. I'm going to hire a consultant. I'm going to call classroom services. And I want you to look at just how very simple this plan is. I am not promising the moon and the stars. I am just promising to take a couple faculty members and teach them about CourseWeb. That is a very humble, very minor thing to promise. So don't go too crazy. I've had students before that try to, I love you guys' ideas, and I love it when you aim big, but don't aim so big that you've tried to take on too much. Like one student wanted to lower the drinking age. I'm like, ooh, you're talking about legislation. That stuff, unless you're illegal minded, that stuff gets really sticky. I had another student say that there was no leave policy. Like if someone in your life, passed away, there was no policy for you to grieve. Like that's not a bad idea, but that's also, she had some problems in terms of, the rules and regulations. And be realistic here. Make sure it's creative, but don't bury yourself. All right, here's my deliverables. When I say deliverables, that means what's the outcome of all this? Well, workshop. I'm going to have a handbook. And I want to have a lunch group so that I can keep in touch with these people and make sure, if they have any CourseWeb issues, that they have a place to kind of ask. My budget, look. This is fairly, the consultant, I guess, that probably would be a lot of money. But think about this. Try to be frugal. And there's, of course, works cited. All right, so that's kind of the end of the proposal part. Let me know if you have any questions. Of course, I'm always here.